what is the link between the arts and humanities? What can we learn from ancient archetypal imagery? And how can we use that archetypal imagery to better understand ourselves and our environment? Now, I must start with a disclaimer. I don't actually study the humanities, so I'm probably not qualified to lecture any of you on the topic. I don't even have my degree, well, yet anyway. I am an artist, however, so that means that I can kind of get away with it. Is the humanities are a constant source of inspiration for my work. And I hope that my insight to understanding the humanities will give you a different perspective on yours. Now, for a while I was unsure what the term humanities actually meant. It's so broad and wide-ranging, how do you actually define it? To define it is to label it and lose the essence of what it actually is. Studying art, the question of what is art is commonly asked and pondered over. An interesting, necessary question, but at times more like rhetoric than a practical conversation. Art is constantly evolving, and no answer is the right one. What art means to the individual is the only true answer, and that is the same for the humanities. Both need to be in constant flux to keep the conversation moving and avoid stagnation. Now, as I went through art school, I found myself being instinctively drawn towards geometry within my work, in one form in particular, the mandala. The intricate beauty and vast variety of its interpretations fascinated me. And looking back, it always had, hence the various mandala tattoos on my arms. Now, upon working with the mandala, I started to realise that it's quite a powerful symbol and very, very interesting, leading to a large body of creative work and theoretical study around it. Or in other words, lots of paintings and also a dissertation. So what actually is a mandala? And how do you make them? The term mandala comes from Sanskrit, the language of ancient India, and translates to circle, round totality, or essence container. To me, essence container makes the most sense, as it really captures the potential contained within it. However, most words when translated from Sanskrit are often oversimplified, losing the essence of the word, and that is true with the mandala. Now, in contemporary Western society, mandalas are often defined as geometric designs, commonly associated with Eastern religions, or some stoned hippies from the 60s. Now, I'm fully aware that I do look a bit like a hippie, but I promise you that I'm not stoned. Well, yet anyways. Now, to understand the mandala, now to associate the mandala to these cultures is to limit its full potential. Yes, it is a fundamental part of these cultures. However, it transcends them, and they are simply using its power. Mandalas are found all throughout the ancient world, and are of great importance to many cultural and spiritual traditions. An analogy to describe this is that every culture has their own unique variation of flower and assigns various meaning to it. However, flowers cannot be attributed to one person or culture. Nobody owns them, however special their relationship to that flower. Mandalas, like flowers, are a universal constant, expressed in an infinite amount of ways. Now, as humans, we communicate through stories, through metaphors and symbols, through shared abstractions that help us make sense of the world. And that is how the mandala should be perceived, not as a two-dimensional image, but as a visual metaphor to comprehend the mysteries of the unknown and attempt to create order out of the chaos of existence. Now, mandalas are present all throughout the ancient world, from various locations, times, and cultures. Probably the most recognisable is that from Eastern traditions, such as Hinduism and Buddhism. Here we have mandalas from ancient Tibet, Nepal, and India, which all share striking resemblances. However, mandalas are not only from the East. Here we find them in Christian stained glass windows from medieval Europe, closer to home in Celtic knotwork, and also in the Middle East. Islamic art, in my opinion, is the most beautiful. Is Islam only uses geometry to depict the divine? Is it beyond the understanding of our material representation? We also find mandalas in Native America. These ones here are from the Navajo tribe. And lastly, we find examples in the Amazon from the Mayan culture. And that is just to name a few. The mandalas are not simply a manifestation of our human imagination. Mandalas are evident all throughout the natural world and serve as a blueprint for creation. With the naked eye, we can observe them in the cross-section of a piece of fruit as it expands out from its centre, in the rings of a tree trunk, or in a spider with its creepy little legs expanding out from its central body, and in the intricate geometric beauty of its web. It is famously observed, and perhaps most beautifully, in that of a snowflake, or commonly in the sunflower as its seeds spiral out from its centre. It is even present in the tool we use to perceive them, the eye itself. Now, modern technology has allowed us to see past our sense restrictions. We can now see things which are very big and also very small. Now let's look at the very small. The building blocks of matter, the atom. If you split it, you'll find electrons spinning around the central nucleus. And if you zoom out further and witness cells dividing from the unity of the original cell, generating organic mandala forms as the foundations of life. Now if we change the scale again and observe our home, Earth, this active fiery core that we never experience, the Earth itself is a living, pulsating mandala. Now we orbit the Earth. Now the Moon orbits the Earth just as we orbit the Sun, together with 7 other planets, contributing to the larger mandala of the Milky Way, which is only a fraction of the observable universe, all interconnected in a mandala so vast it's beyond our comprehension. Now, so the complex definition and multi-locational origins of the mandala emphasises distinction as far more than a geometric design. The mandala is a visual philosophy of our world, and a philosophy that has remained consistent across borders and time. The mandala symbolises the union of opposites, our world in balance and order. Our world is sacred and interconnected. Now, Alan Watts, a 20th century philosopher, celebrated for his translations of Eastern philosophy to a Western audience, describes the unity of existence as follows. The fundamental, ultimate mystery. The only thing you need to know to understand the deepest metaphysical secrets is this: that for every inside, there is an outside, and for every outside, there is an inside. And although they are separate, they go together. Now, what do I mean when I say the unity of existence? Understand the idea of unity is a difficult concept to grasp. The idea itself is a paradox. For something to exist, its opposite must also exist. We are dualistic thinking beings, and the idea of unity contradicts the very foundations of our worldview. But bear with me. So we know that something exists. Our universe exists. Consciousness exists. Here we have our universe, emerging out of the mystery of the Big Bang. Our universe is a single entity. But how do we comprehend that? How does our consciousness understand it? Like anything, you break it down into smaller chunks. Consciousness's first division is the creation of opposites. It creates 2 opposing ends of the spectrum, black and white, feminine and masculine, and gives us the opportunity to pick a point within it before infinitely dividing, creating the complex world that we experience today. Mandalas are symbolic of that world before that division. Now, this concept is beautifully captured in the Taoist mandala, the renowned yin-yang. The design is circular, representational of everything in existence. The circle is the perfect shape and contains the potential to create all other shapes. The circle is then divided into 2 equal but contrasting halves, black and white, passive and active, feminine and masculine, symbolising the 2 opposing forces that construct our reality, both captured within the entirety of the circle. Each segment, however, contains an aspect of the other, showing that we can never hope to strive for any absolute. Black always contains white because they are one and the same. Now, let's move on from that a little bit. Now, the mandala has been used by many cultural and spiritual traditions. However, Buddhism is perhaps the most notable. With emphasis on process rather than outcome, Buddhists believe the mandala represents the universe in its entirety. I hope you are starting to see the pattern here. Now, the most notable Buddhist mandala is perhaps the Kalakshara. Commonly translated to Wheel of Time, the Kalakshara transcends its material depiction and often serves as a blueprint for sand mandalas. Now, sand mandalas are a meditation exercise, practiced in order for the monks to attain awareness and ultimately the end of suffering. To begin, a blueprint is constructed before the monks tediously apply sand within the lines of the design via a chakpo. Practiced collaboratively, they can take days, sometimes weeks, to complete. And the monks must first undertake years of artistic training and philosophical study of the sacred symbols contained within it. For Buddhists, the act of creation is the meditation. The intense focus and contemplation over the mandala allows for the monks to see the true nature of reality. And upon completion, the mandala is then destroyed, and the sand scattered into the river, sending the positive energy of the mandala back out into the world. Here we can witness the mandala being used for the first time as a psychological aid. Claims have been made that the Buddha was the first psychologist, and this practice only strengthens that theory. Now, as we've seen this far, mandala has been expressed in countless forms throughout history. However, its overlying philosophy of unity and connection have remained consistent. Numerous ancient philosophies speak of the nature of existence as a division from a unified whole, each with their own name for it. In China, they write of the Tao. Hinduism speak of Brahman. Christianity and Judaism have God. Islam worship Allah. And the ancient Greeks spoke of the Logos. The concept of a void was non-existent. Everything was connected, and we were simply a part of it. So how do we go from this understanding of the world to a feeling of separation? The feeling that we are not one with, but separate from our world. Now, humanity's understanding of the world was shaken when in the 8th century, an Indian mathematician theorized the idea of zero, a revolutionary idea that changed the way we view mathematics and the world. Until this point, zero had been used as a place number in Greek and Mayan numerical systems, but never seen as a number in its own right. But think about it. Zero doesn't actually exist. Zero is a made-up concept. When maths was used for simple things, such as counting bananas, you wouldn't need to say, I've got 0 bananas. You just didn't have any. You didn't have 0 bananas. Zero is an unnecessary idea and a product of our human imagination. Now, the idea spread to the Islamic world centuries later. Maths and science blossomed in the area, as zero allowed for the visualization of abstract mathematical and scientific concepts. Centuries later, the idea spread to Europe, but was rejected for some time. Zero did not appear in the Christian Bible and was therefore prohibited, permitting the notion of emptiness into the abundance of God's creation. Zero provided a framework for atheism and detachment from spirit in the Western world. We are no longer viewing the world holistically. Now, the mandala lay dormant in the West for centuries. It was out with contemporary Western thought and understanding. However, remained within the collective unconscious of humanity, only to be rediscovered by Carl Jung, a 20th century Swiss psychoanalyst and founder of analytical psychology. Jung worked extensively into and coined the term the collective unconscious. So the collective unconscious is where you have your conscious awareness, the tip of the iceberg. Your personal unconscious, what lies beneath the surface. In our collective unconscious, the water which connects all icebergs. The collective unconscious is shared between humanity and is home to various archetypal images, stories, metaphors and symbols. The mandala is one of these symbols. The Young published numerous works during his lifetime, and his ideas expand out past psychology and into art, literature, and philosophy, just to name a few. Now, Jung's relationship with the mandala originates from personal experience. Throughout his tour of duty in a British prisoner of war camp, Jung intuitively started to paint mandalas, stating that it reflected his inner situation at the time. It is interesting to note the time and place of his discovery. There was no external information concerning the mandala. He didn't have a smartphone with a world of images at his fingertips. It arose from deep within him, from our collective unconscious. He describes his experience as follows. With the help of these drawings, I could observe my psychic transformations from day to day. And only gradually did I discover what mandala really is. Formation, transformation, eternal mind's eternal creation, and that is the self, the wholeness of personality. Now, Jung continued his practice, and in 1928, re-established the mandala to the West, the modern West. Jung began to use mandalas when working with his patients, believing it to be a window into their unconscious. And by analysing their drawings, like the ones behind me, he could gain a deeper understanding of their condition. Jung prompted his patients to draw from intuition, to reach a state of flow to allow the unconscious to reveal itself on the page. Jung would then work with his patients to try and understand and decipher the archetypal imagery contained within the drawings. Now, Jung believed the mandala to be an archetypal symbol of wholeness, and proposed the role of the mandala was for self-actualization, to understand your true self, the wholeness of your personality. Now, Jung was the first to put the mandala to the test of Western scientific thought, and his insights have begun to pave a new understanding of the mandala. Now, as you can imagine, this research completely changed my relationship with the mandala, which began with a pure aesthetic appeal. However, I found the symbol to be way more interesting and significant than I initially perceived. Here are some examples of my earlier work to do with the mandala. I then began to explore new methods of creating mandalas in an attempt to create my own unique approach to it, and a mandala that reflects the time we are currently in. The mandala has always been adapted to its current time and location, and that is how I want my work to be received, as a reflection of not only myself, but our humanity as a whole. So my process of mandala making begins with paint. I strive to reach a state of flow when painting, to allow the work to flow through me and not from me. I paint very expressively and intuitively, with a strong focus on colour and texture, by building up layers of colour to create a sense of depth within the work. The surface layer holds attention of what lies beneath. Most of the painting lies beneath the surface, but still has a strong subliminal influence on the overall work, which I find very interesting. To me, it relates to the mind, and is symbolic of the unconscious and the impact it has. We are driven by unconscious desires that lie beneath the surface, and although not visually present, have a strong influence on our actions. Now, I then work digitally to compose the mandala, building up a blueprint to work from by rotating shapes around a central point before strategically selecting certain areas within it, creating areas of symmetry in the overall asymmetric work. I then laser cut the design into the painting, leaving me with countless different shapes, which I then rearranged to compose the finished piece, transforming my original painting into a geometric abstraction. Now, after deep contemplation, I made the decision to stop using the term mandala to describe my work, and to simply use the broad term of geometry, to avoid any misconceptions or preconceived notions of what to expect. Collectively, we still have a confused understanding of what the mandala actually is. And when I'm not there to give a half-an-hour talk on the subject, I felt it distracting and not adding to the overall experience of the work. I want my art to be a symbol for free association, inviting you to project your own narrative upon it, creating space for internal contemplation to allow you to come to your own conclusion about the piece. Stepping away from the term mandala allowed me to freely express myself without the attachments of cultural associations. However, I still felt strongly about the message behind it, and then I realised the power of the mandala lies within the unconscious, and I could portray its message clearer on a subliminal level. Now, this got me very interested in the role of the conscious and unconscious mind and how they interact to perceive the world, but more importantly, when perceiving a work of art. Now, as I learned from Gestalt theory, it's in our human nature to understand objects as an entire structure and not the sum of their individual parts. Our mind hallucinates our reality and fills in the gaps of what it believes to be there. Now, I found this very exciting, as I realised I could create a work of art that allowed the mandala to only be truly present when observed, as the mind interprets the strategically placed abstract shapes and forms them into a mandala. The work therefore creates a dissonance in the mind, as the unconscious is aware of the underlying blueprint of the work and comprehends it accordingly, whereas the conscious mind overthinks the geometry, puzzling itself. There's a contradiction in the work which the ego craves to understand. This confusion leads to more time looking at the work, and in turn, more time contemplating the mandala. Now, I found the process of working with mandalas deeply therapeutic and meditative, and I consider my work to be a meditation in creation and also observation. A visual metaphor to help understand myself, the world around me, and our humanity as a whole, and hope that upon observation it can spark a similar response. As an artist, I want to share and express ideas in a unique way, to give a visual representation of complex thoughts and theories, as art is deeply powerful and of vital significance to humanity. Our relationship to art is very instinctual and works powerfully from the unconscious. Now, I am aware that my understanding of the humanities is vague, and perhaps even cherry-picked to some degree. It is based off my own subjective experience and artistic interest, and I'm very interested to hear your opinions, as I believe the role of the artist is to be in the fringes of society, stepping out into the unknown and trying to create order out of the chaos of existence, to propose new ideas, well, ancient ideas in this case, and new ways of expressing them, to accept criticism and continue moving forward, as art is wildly subjective, and it is the role of the artist to express his subjective view of the world. Thank you.